My boyfriend refused to acknowledge our relationship, so I left. He didn't care until he saw me holding hands with someone else. It was the 3rd year of my secret relationship with Gabriel, and he still refused to make it public. At a party, someone made a joke. "Gabriel, Camila is amazing. Haven't you ever fallen for her after all this time?" I watched him toast with someone else, a spark of hope igniting in my chest. He leaned back nonchalantly. "Don't be ridiculous. Camila and I are just friends." My heart sank. "Yeah, just friends," I murmured, trying to sound indifferent. The atmosphere grew tense. Someone jumped in to ease the situation. "Well, that's great news. A friend of mine is really interested in Camila." He turned to me. "Camila, would you like me to give you his number?" Before I could answer, Gabriel set down his glass and approached me, casually draping an arm over my shoulders. He stared at the guy. "Don't even think about it. She's my friend, and a very good one at that. Keep your disgusting friends away from her." I pushed his arm off my shoulders. "Actually, go ahead and give me the number. I'm always open to meeting new people." His friend quickly handed me a business card, and I added the contact to my phone. When I looked up, I found Gabriel's gaze. There was a flicker of amusement mixed with something I couldn't decipher. A dull ache spread through my chest. I started to walk away, but Gabriel stopped me, pulling out his phone. "Camila, smile for the camera." The photo captured our faces. Him, handsome with his usual smug expression, me, pale with empty eyes. He posted it instantly with the caption, "Friendship goals." Something inside me broke. 3 years of a secret relationship, known only to the two of us. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror, took out my phone, opened the post, and commented, "Friendship goals." And then I left. Gabriel called, asking where I was. I told him I wasn't feeling well. He accepted it without insisting, telling me to get some rest. But I didn't go back to my apartment. I went to his place. Sometimes I slept there, but there wasn't a single trace of me in the living room or anywhere else. My things were tucked away in the bathroom of his suite. He didn't want anyone to know. "I prefer to keep my private life private," he used to say. "If you can accept that, we can be together." A perfect excuse. And even if he hadn't used it, I probably wouldn't have been able to say no. I owed a lot to his family and to him. But now I understood. He wasn't hiding his private life. He was hiding me. I used my key to get in and walked toward the bedroom. But in the living room, I saw a huge strawberry-colored teddy bear on the couch. It wasn't mine, and it definitely wasn't Gabriel's. Suddenly, that Facebook post from earlier that night made sense. It was for another girl. Surprisingly, I didn't feel much pain. I went to the bedroom and gathered my things. Then, I took off the necklace I had worn for 3 years. The pendant was a ring, a gift from Gabriel. I had never worn it in public. It was time to leave it behind. On my 3rd day in Barcelona, Gabriel called. I didn't answer. Half an hour later, I got a message. "I'll keep the ring for 3 days." I knew what that meant. Sometimes we argued, and he would just disappear. In the end, I was always the one to give in. We had been together since university. I had followed him from Seville to live in Madrid. I had never thought about giving up before, but now I was exhausted. I replied, "Don't bother. Just throw it away." He didn't respond. I stared at the message for a few seconds and then blocked his number. Gabriel filled another glass and drank it in one go. He overheard someone mention my name. "My friend is completely in love with her. He called me last night. He couldn't stop talking about her." Gabriel slammed his glass against the table. "He won't be interested. Tell him not to waste his time." "How do you know?" Gabriel slid his finger across his phone screen. "Camila is already in love with someone. Even if Brad Pitt himself showed up, it wouldn't make any difference." He pulled out a pack of cigarettes and stepped outside, leaving the noise of the party behind. He lit a cigarette and looked at his phone again. The last conversation was still there. "Throw it away." He took a long drag. The smoke didn't help calm the growing irritation inside him. He typed quickly, "I already threw it away." But the message didn't send. A red exclamation mark appeared on the screen. "Blocked." Gabriel froze for a moment. Then he let out a bitter laugh. "Let's see how long you can keep this up." My days in Barcelona flew by. On the eve of my flight back to Madrid, I ran into an old school friend. Daniel walked into the bar, impeccable, dressed in a dark suit. My friends nudged me and laughed. I blushed, maybe because of the alcohol. Daniel met my gaze. "Camila, long time no see." "Hi," I stammered, standing up. As soon as he joined us, one of my friends smiled. "I just posted on Instagram that you were in Barcelona, and Daniel liked it instantly. He now lived abroad and rarely came back." "He came all the way just for you," another joked. I gave a discreet glance. He was talking to someone else, but his strong and imposing presence always drew attention. Now even more so. I turned my gaze away. "He says he's just passing through." Coincidence? I don't think so. But when the night ended, Daniel offered to take me to the hotel. Before I could refuse, my friends disappeared. He hadn't been drinking, so he drove. On the way, my phone rang. It was a friend from Madrid. "Camila, tomorrow we're going out for drinks. Gabriel is bringing his new girlfriend to introduce her to the group. The first time. I'll probably not be back in time. Have fun." My voice came out tense. "Come on. Gabriel insisted on inviting you. After all, you're his best friend." Looking at the city lights through the window, I let out an empty laugh. "We're just friends. It doesn't matter if I'm there or not." "Camila, wait. I have to go." I hung up before she could say anything else. The calls kept coming. I ignored them all until my phone finally went silent. The car stopped. Daniel turned to face me. For me, we had arrived. "Camila!" I didn't move. My gaze remained fixed on the city, the light reflections blurred by the rain on the glass. My heart felt numb. "Matteo." My voice came out almost in a whisper. My reflection in the glass seemed distant, empty. And then, the words simply came out. "Do you want to come up?" Matteo didn't nod. His dark eyes locked with mine for a moment, but he didn't say anything. He just opened the car door, got out, and walked to the passenger side, opening it for me. My heart was pounding, not with excitement, but with uncertainty. Was I really doing this? We rode up in the elevator in silence. He leaned against the mirrored wall, watching me with that intense gaze he always had. I avoided looking directly at him, but I could feel his presence, his closeness. When the door opened, I walked to my room and unlocked the door. As soon as we entered, I heard the sound of the door closing behind us. The air was heavy. It wasn't desire. It wasn't love. It was the need to erase the past, to crush any memory of Fernando. Matteo approached and pulled me into a kiss. It wasn't gentle, but it wasn't rough either. It was intense, filled with something unresolved. I let myself go for a few seconds. But then, that feeling arrived. The feeling of doing something wrong. Fernando. No. He had no right to be in my thoughts. He had left me behind so many times, treated me like a convenient shadow while living his life without caring about mine. But even knowing all that, I couldn't continue. "Matteo." He stopped immediately. His eyes scanned my face. "You don't want to." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. I shook my head, unable to say anything else. He sighed and stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "I knew it. You haven't forgotten him yet." I swallowed hard. I wanted to deny it, but it would have been a lie. "It's not that, I didn't finish the sentence." Matteo smiled, but it wasn't a joyful gesture. "Bianca, did you know you always left me as a second choice?" His words hit me like a punch. "That's not true." "Yes, it is. You rejected me in school because you were in love with him. And now, after everything he did to you, you're still here, paralyzed, thinking about him." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. "You know what the worst part is?" He continued, laughing without humor. "That even so, I came here. Again. Like an idiot." I lowered my head, feeling a knot in my chest. "I'm sorry." He was silent for a moment, then sighed. "You don't have to apologize. You owe me nothing." He took the jacket he had left on the bed and put it on calmly. "If you ever want something real, find me. But don't come to me as an escape." And with that, he left. I stayed there, staring at the closed door, feeling ridiculous. I let myself fall onto the bed, wrapped in the weight of emptiness. But the worst part was knowing that Matteo was right. I was still trapped in Fernando, and I hated myself for it. The following days I tried to distract myself. Outings, dinners with friends, anything to not think about him. But the thought always came back. Until one ordinary morning, my phone vibrated. "Fernando." It wasn't a message. It was a call. The urge to reject it was strong. But I ended up answering. What? My voice came out sharp. He stayed silent for a few seconds. Aren't you coming back? I laughed without humor. No. Aren't you even going to listen to what I have to say? Fernando, what do you want? He sighed. I want to see you. My heart tightened. I closed my eyes tightly. For what? To pretend we're just friends while you show off someone else? Bianca, it's not like that. Isn't it? Then how is it? I made a mistake. Ah, that was new. How convenient. Now that I'm gone, you realized. Meet me to talk. Just talk. Part of me wanted to say no and move on. But the other part still wanted answers. And it was that part that won. Tomorrow after lunch. And I hung up before he could say anything else. The next day, there he was, sitting in the cafe where we'd agreed to meet. He looked exactly the same. The same well-groomed hair, the same serious expression, the same look that always made my heart race. But this time, I didn't feel that flutter in my stomach. He smiled when he saw me, but there was something different in his expression. Attention. I sat across from him. Talk. He stared at me for a moment, and then looked away. I ruined everything, didn't I? I crossed my arms. If what you want is confirmation, yes. He let out a slight laugh, but without joy. I always thought I had time. That you'd always be there. My stomach churned. Well, you were wrong. He nodded, looking at his coffee cup. Are you with someone? Why do you care? He pressed his lips together. Because I don't like the idea. I rolled my eyes. Oh, now you care? I've always cared about you. I just didn't know how to show it. I let out a bitter laugh. You showed me the exact opposite. He ran a hand over his face, clearly tired. Do you still love me? I swallowed hard. I don't know. The truth was, as much as it hurt, Fernando was still part of me. But that didn't mean I wanted to go back. He looked me in the eyes. I can fix this. No, Fernando. You can't. The pain in his gaze almost made me give in. But then I remembered the years I had been nothing but a shadow in his life. I stood up. I deserve more. He stayed there, staring at me as if he wanted to say something but didn't know how. And then, for the first time, I left him behind. The feeling of leaving him behind was liberating, but it also left a bitter taste. Fernando spent years treating me like a shadow, hiding me, discarding me when it suited him. And now, suddenly, he wanted to fix everything. As if a few words could erase every moment I felt invisible by his side. No. I could simply move on, forget it, and continue with my life. But that would be too easy for him. Fernando needed to feel what it was like to be sidelined, ignored, discarded as if he had never been important. And I was determined to make sure he understood that. In the following days, I let him believe that I had truly moved on. I kept my distance, blocked his number, disappeared from his sight. Until one random night, I received an unexpected message. Mateo, I'm in Madrid. Shall we go out? I smiled. It was the perfect moment. Mateo was never stupid. He knew I wasn't ready for anything serious. But he also knew I needed a distraction. And he was willing to be that distraction. Me? Sure. Pick me up at 8 o'clock. When we arrived at the restaurant, I knew we were drawing attention. Mateo always had an imposing presence. Elegant. Confident. And now, with me by his side, he seemed even more striking. That's when I saw him. Fernando. He was sitting in a corner with his new girlfriend, the one he had brought to introduce to his friends. She was laughing, leaning toward him, clearly enchanted. But his eyes were on me. Perfect. I took Mateo's arm and whispered something in his ear, making him chuckle softly. I didn't have to look at Fernando to know he was dying inside. The waiter led us to our table, and I made sure to choose a strategic spot. One where he could see me perfectly. Mateo noticed. What exactly are we doing here? He asked with a playful smile. What do you think? He laughed. This isn't moving on, Bianca. I took a sip of wine, pretending to be uninterested. Who said I'm trying to move on? He looked at me for a moment and shook his head. You're dangerous. No. I'm fair. And then, as if he were waiting for the exact moment, Fernando got up pretending to go to the bathroom. He walked past our table, but he made sure to slow down as he reached my side. Bianca. I pretended to be surprised. Fernando, what a coincidence. He squinted his eyes. Who would have thought you'd come back to Madrid so soon? The world is small, isn't it? The silence between us lingered for a few seconds. Mateo was watching the scene with amusement, but he didn't intervene. Fernando glanced at him, then back at me. Are you okay? I smiled. I've never been better. His eyes hardened. Good. And then, without waiting for a response, he walked away. But I knew he wouldn't leave things like this. In the following days, the messages started coming. Fernando, can we talk? Fernando, I just want to understand what happened. Fernando, I need to see you. And then, the final blow. Fernando, Mateo? Seriously? Now he was irritated. I replied immediately. Is there a problem, Fernando? I thought my private life was no one's business. The blue check appeared, but there was no response. I smiled. The last straw came 2 weeks later. Fernando showed up at my building, knocked on the door as if he had some right to be there. When I opened, he walked in without waiting for an invitation, his face filled with frustration. What are you doing? I crossed my arms. I think I'm living my life. Why, Fernando? Are you surprised? He ran a hand through his hair, clearly irritated. Are you with Mateo just to provoke me? I rolled my eyes. Now you care. When I was the one waiting for you, protecting you, accepting to be your secret, you didn't care. But now that I'm with someone who actually acknowledges me, does it bother you? He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. I ruined everything, Bianca. I know. I stayed silent. But he hesitated. I don't want to lose you. The old Bianca would have melted in that instant. She would have listened to those words and believed them. But this Bianca... I laughed. You already lost me, Fernando. And then I dealt the final blow. I took my phone, unlocked the screen, and in front of him, opened a picture of Mateo holding me by the waist, both of us smiling on the balcony of a luxurious hotel. Fernando paled. You wouldn't do this. I stepped forward, pressing a finger to his chest. You made me wait 3 years to be recognized. I won't give you even 3 minutes of hope. Fernando looked at me like I was a stranger. And then, without saying anything more, he left. This time, he was the one left behind. I watched the door close behind him and felt a cold satisfaction fill me. Fernando had finally tasted his own medicine. But despite my apparent calm, I knew it wouldn't stop there. Fernando had never dealt well with losing control over something, and losing me must have been eating him alive inside. The days passed, and I enjoyed every single one of them as if I were savoring my victory. I was seen with Mateo several times, and each one of those appearances seemed to hurt Fernando more than any insult. I knew he was aware of everything, that he saw every photo, every detail. But then he started showing up. First, it was at the cafe I used to frequent. Coincidence? Maybe. But when it happened again, twice in the same week, I knew it wasn't. He was close, watching, trying to figure out if I had really left him behind. Then it got worse. I was at a networking event, surrounded by influential people who could be key to my career, when I felt a heavy gaze on me. I turned my head, and there he was, standing on the other side of the room, holding a glass of whiskey. Fernando was never much of a drinker. The fact that he was there, alone, looking at me like a predator eyeing its prey, was a clear warning. I kept acting normally, pretending he didn't exist. But in that moment, I realized my victory wasn't complete yet. He still wanted me, and if I didn't destroy him completely, he would never leave me in peace. I waited. It didn't take long for him to act. One night, late, I received a message from an unknown number. Can we talk? I smiled. Of course, it was him. I ignored the message. 5 minutes later, another one. Bianca, I just want to talk to you. Then another. I know you still love me. That made me laugh. Did he really think he could drag me back with empty words? Finally, the last one. I need to see you. It's important. I stopped. Important. My curiosity won. Where? At our cafe. He still called it that. Our cafe. As if there were still an us. But I went. Not because I wanted to hear his apologies, but because I wanted to make sure he felt the bitter taste of defeat one last time. He was already there when I arrived. He was wearing a well-fitted casual suit, but his face showed clear signs of sleepless nights. The dark circles were deep, and his expression wasn't that of a calm man. I didn't sit down. Say what you need to say. He looked at me for a few seconds before interlacing his fingers on the table. Bianca, I want to try again. The laugh came out of me instantly. You want to? How interesting. Because I don't. He closed his eyes for a second, as if trying to contain his frustration. I was an idiot. I let my fear, my image, all of that get in the way of what really mattered. You were always there, and I raised a hand. Fernando, stop. This is pathetic. He tensed. Pathetic? Yes, pathetic. You're here telling me all this now, after I left you, after I finally took control of my life. This isn't regret, it's ego. You can't stand the idea that I was the one who discarded you. He took a deep breath, his fists clenched. I love you. No. You had 3 years to show it, and you chose to hide me, to pretend I didn't exist when I needed you most. That's not love, Fernando. That's selfishness. The silence between us stretched for a few seconds. Then he let out a dry laugh. Are you with Mateo for revenge? I'm with whoever I want. Do you think he's better than me? I crossed my arms and looked at him firmly. Mateo may never have been my first choice, but at least he never made me feel like I was his last. The phrase hit him like a punch. He looked away, clenched his jaw, and took a deep breath. Then came the question I knew would come. If I had recognized you from the start, would we still be together? I smiled. If you had recognized me, I would never have discovered my worth. I grabbed my bag, ready to leave. Bianca, you lost, Fernando. Accept it. And I left. But Fernando didn't accept it. Days later, I started receiving anonymous calls. At first, they were spaced out. Then constant. And then worse. One night, Mateo called me, his voice full of anger. Fernando showed up at my office. My muscles tensed. What? Yeah, he showed up out of nowhere. He started insinuating that you still want him, that all of this is a game, that he knows you still think about him. My blood boiled. What did you do? I asked him if he preferred I call security or if he was going to leave on his own. He left, but it was clear this was still not over. I gritted my teeth. Fernando wasn't going to stop. He couldn't stand the idea that I had won. But I was tired, so I did the only thing he never expected me to do. I took my phone and called. Not Fernando, but his new girlfriend. The number wasn't hard to find. A few social media platforms, some attention to comments, and done. When she answered, her voice was hesitant. Hello. Hi, Mariana. Silence. Who is this? I smiled. I'm Bianca. You know who I am, right? More silence. I think so. Great. I need to tell you something about Fernando. And then, I told her everything. I talked about the years in the shadow, the lies, the messages, his desperate attempts to win me back. And I ended with one final warning. If you don't leave him now, you'll be next. The silence on the other end of the line was enough for me to know I had won. 2 days later, Fernando sent me a final email. Thank you. You took everything from me. I smiled as I read it and deleted the message without responding. Now he was truly destroyed. Time passed, and the storm Fernando tried to create around me finally dissipated. But it wasn't without scars. It wasn't without marks. In the months following that last message, he disappeared completely. No more calls. No more messages. No more accidental meetings. Nothing. It was as if he had evaporated from the face of the earth. And that's exactly how it was supposed to be. I learned from mutual acquaintances that Mariana left him the day after our conversation. She threw all his clothes out the window of the apartment and changed the locks. Fernando tried to reverse the situation, but Mariana had already seen the truth. And more than that, she told everyone. The reputation he valued so much started to crumble. His friends, the ones who laughed at his jokes and pretended not to see his cowardice, began to distance themselves. The women who once admired him started seeing a desperate and pathetic man. If Fernando thought I was disposable, fate made sure to show him that the one who had no value was him. The last thing I heard about him was that he quit his job and moved to another city. But what really happened to him, I don't know. And I don't care. Mateus and I never became a real couple. I knew that from the start. And he did too. What we had was an intense connection, a complicity that helped me get through everything without falling apart. But it wasn't love. It never was. One night, after a pleasant dinner and a few glasses of wine, he took my hand and smiled. "You know this isn't going to last, right?" I squeezed his hand back and smiled. "Yes." And that was it. A painless farewell. No regrets. He continued his life, and I continued mine. Today, when I think of him, I don't feel resentment. Just gratitude. Mateus was the push I needed to get out of the abyss where Fernando had sunk me. And for that, I will always respect him. Now, talking about me, I became the woman Fernando never wanted me to be. Independent, confident. Where I once settled for being a shadow, now I shone with my own light. I built my career, expanded my network, and finally achieved the stability I had always dreamed of. My name began to be recognized in my professional field, and people stopped seeing me as Fernando's ex. Now I was Bianca, the woman who would never again accept being a secret. And ironically, that's exactly what brought me one last surprise. One day, while having coffee at a busy restaurant, I heard someone call my name. "Bianca." I looked up and found a face I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't Fernando. It was Daniel, the childhood friend who, years ago, appeared in Barcelona and awakened something in me. But for reasons of fate, never had his chance. At that moment in my life, he was still impeccable, in a well-tailored suit with that gaze that always seemed to see right through me. "It's been a long time since I've seen you." I smiled. "Yes, it's been quite a while." We talked for hours, without haste, without expectations. I learned that he was now an important name in the business world, traveling frequently, but finally deciding to settle down. And it was at that moment when something happened. I didn't feel anxious. I didn't feel that fear of being left behind. I just felt calm, because for the first time in my life, I knew I didn't need anyone to be complete. If Daniel wanted to be part of my life, perfect. But if he didn't, it wouldn't make the slightest difference. We went out together that night. He took me to dinner, made me laugh, and when we said goodbye, he looked me in the eyes in a way no one ever had. "I don't know exactly when you became this woman, but I like it." And for the first time, I believed him. Fernando no longer existed for me. I left him where he always should have stayed, in the past.